Marcus Reed's consciousness returned slowly, accompanied by the acrid smell of burning electronics and the metallic taste of blood in his mouth. His head pounded with each heartbeat as he forced his eyes open, blinking away the haze of confusion. The cockpit of his cargo hauler was a mess of sparking wires and crumpled metal, the familiar hum of the engines replaced by an ominous silence. "Well, that could have gone better," he muttered, his voice hoarse as he fumbled with the safety harness. The release mechanism was jammed, forcing him to use his emergency knife to cut through the restraints. As he stood on unsteady legs, the floor tilted at an alarming angle, confirming what he'd feared. His ship was definitely not going anywhere soon. Marcus made his way through the damaged vessel, taking inventory of the situation. The cargo bay had been breached, but thankfully he'd been hauling medical supplies and food rations rather than anything dangerous. Most importantly, his personal gear had survived the crash intact. He grabbed his survival pack, a portable scanner, and his father's old energy pistol, a relic from his military days that Marcus had never had cause to use. The emergency hatch hissed open, revealing an alien world bathed in the soft glow of twin suns. The air hit him like a warm embrace, thick with humidity and filled with the most incredible scents. Sweet floral notes mixed with something earthy and clean. Marcus stepped out onto spongy ground, covered in what looked like moss, but it sparkled with tiny points of light that pulsed in rhythm with his footsteps. The landscape was breathtaking. Towering trees stretched impossibly high, their trunks a deep purple-black, while their leaves shimmered with an iridescent quality that made them seem almost alive. Smaller plants dotted the forest floor, many of them glowing with soft bioluminescence. Strange creatures flitted through the canopy, not quite birds, not quite insects, but something gracefully in between. "Okay, Marcus," he said to himself, shouldering his pack. "First things first, water, shelter, and figure out where the hell you are." His scanner was damaged, but functional enough to detect that the atmosphere was breathable and the local gravity was slightly lighter than Earth standard. No immediate toxins registered, though he made a mental note to be careful about what he ate or drank until he could run more comprehensive tests. Over the next few days, Marcus established a routine. He salvaged materials from his ship to create a basic shelter nearby, using the vessel's hull as one wall and constructing the rest from fallen branches and large, waxy leaves. A small stream provided fresh water, and he'd managed to rig up a simple filtration system using ship components. Food was trickier. The scanner helped him identify some fruits that appeared safe, and he'd fashioned crude traps from salvaged wire and metal strips. So far, he'd caught a few small creatures that looked like a cross between rabbits and lizards. They tasted better than they looked. On his fourth night on the planet, as he checked his traps by the light of the larger moon, Marcus heard something that made him freeze. Not the usual chittering of nocturnal creatures, or the whisper of wind through the strange leaves, but something that sounded almost like crying. He followed the sound to one of his snares, set near a game trail by the stream. What he found there made his heart skip a beat. Caught in the wire trap wasn't an animal, but a person, or at least something that looked remarkably human. She was young, probably in her early 20s, with the most striking appearance Marcus had ever seen. Her skin had a subtle silver blue tint it seemed to shimmer in the moonlight, and her hair was long and dark with streaks of lighter blue woven through it. When she looked up at him, her eyes were a deep violet color that seemed to hold depths of emotion. But what struck him most was the fear in those eyes, quickly followed by a resigned acceptance that chilled him to the bone. She clearly expected him to harm her. Hey, it's okay," Marcus said softly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. He approached slowly, the way he might approach a frightened animal. "I'm not going to hurt you. Let me get you out of there." The woman, for despite her alien appearance, she was undeniably female, watched him warily as he carefully worked to free her leg from the snare. The wire had cut into her skin, leaving traces of blood that looked startlingly red against her silver-blue complexion. Once she was free, she scrambled backward, putting distance between them while keeping her eyes fixed on his face. Marcus slowly reached for his water canteen, offering it to her. "Water," he said simply, miming drinking. After a moment's hesitation, she took the canteen and drank deeply. When she handed it back, she spoke in a voice like music, though her words were incomprehensible. Marcus shook his head regretfully. "I'm sorry, I don't understand," he said. Then, pointing to himself, he said, "Marcus. My name is Marcus." She studied him for a long moment, then placed a hand on her chest. "Nira," she said clearly. "Nira," Marcus repeated, and was rewarded with something that might have been a small smile. Their communication remained limited, but over the next hour, through gestures and simple words, Marcus began to piece together a situation. She was alone, had been injured, and seemed to be running from something. When he gestured toward his camp and pantomimed eating and sleeping, she hesitated for a long time before finally nodding. As they walked back to his makeshift home, Marcus found himself stealing glances at his unexpected companion. There was something about her, a grace in the way she moved, an intelligence in her eyes, that captivated him. Whatever had brought her to his trap, he was grateful for it. Neither of them knew that this chance encounter would change both their lives forever, setting in motion events that would challenge everything they thought they knew about love, loyalty, and the vast possibilities of the universe itself. Nira Voss had not slept peacefully in many cycles, but something about the strange alien's presence allowed her to rest deeply for the first time since her exile. She woke to the smell of cooking food and found Marcus tending a small fire carefully, roasting some of the native tubers she recognized as safe to eat. He looked up when she stirred, offering her that peculiar expression she was beginning to understand meant friendliness among his kind, a stretching of the lips that revealed his teeth. Among her people, such a display might be threatening, but with Marcus, it felt warm. "Good morning," he said in his odd language, then attempted her people's traditional greeting, mangling the pronunciation terribly. "Veltar Neshi?" Despite everything, Nira found herself laughing, a sound she hadn't made in far too long. "Veltar Neshi, Marcus," she corrected gently, and watched his face light up with pleasure at learning something new about her culture. Over their shared meal, Nira began to teach him words in her language while he did the same with his. His tongue was called English, he explained, and he came from a place called Earth among the stars. The concept fascinated her. Her people had always wondered if others lived beyond their world. As the days passed, their communication improved rapidly. Nira discovered that Marcus was remarkably intelligent, picking up her language with impressive speed. More than that, he listened when she spoke, truly listened, in a way that reminded her why she had refused to marry Cale Thorne. "Tell me about your people," Marcus said one evening as they worked together to reinforce their shelter. His hands moved skillfully with the salvaged materials, and Nira found herself admiring their strength and gentleness. Nira's expression darkened. "The Zelani are traditional. We believe in old ways, old laws." She struggled to find words he would understand. "I was to be joined with Cale Thorne, son of our leader. But I she touched her heart. "I could not love him. He is proud, cruel sometimes. I wanted to choose my own path, to continue my healing studies." Marcus paused in his work, looking at her with those warm brown eyes. "So they cast you out for wanting freedom?" "The elders said I brought shame to my family, that my refusal would encourage other young women to rebel." Nira's voice grew bitter. Kale was angry. He said no other man would want a woman who defied tradition so boldly, that I would wander alone until I begged to return. He sounds like an ass, Marcus said firmly, then quickly added, sorry, I mean, he sounds like a fool. Nira smiled at his consideration for her feelings, even when discussing someone who had hurt her. What is ass? Marcus's face reddened, another peculiar trait of his kind. It means someone who is stupid and mean. Then yes, Nira said with satisfaction, Kale Thorne is an ass. Their laughter echoed through the grove, and Nira felt something inside her chest loosen, a knot of pain she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. In return for her stories, Marcus shared his own past. He spoke of growing up on a world of vast oceans and metal cities, of learning to pilot ships among the stars, of losing his parents in an accident, and choosing a solitary life, hauling cargo between distant worlds. Weren't you lonely? Nira asked as she showed him which plants could be woven into rope and which would poison if touched. Marcus considered this while helping her gather materials. I thought I preferred being alone. After my parents died, it seemed safer not to get too close to people. He glanced at her meaningfully. I'm starting to think I might have been wrong about that. Their days developed a pleasant rhythm. Marcus proved surprisingly adept at learning her world's secrets, which fruits were safe, how to read the weather patterns in the bioluminescent moss, how to move quietly through the forest without disturbing the more dangerous creatures. In exchange, he shared knowledge of his technology, showing her how his devices worked and letting her help repair some of the simpler components. Your hands are steadier than mine, he admitted as she delicately reconnected some damaged circuitry in his scanner. Have you always been good with intricate work? Healers must have precise touch, Nira explained, focused on the tiny wires. We work with delicate herbs, set broken bones, stitch wounds closed with threads finer than spider silk. Marcus watched her work with obvious admiration. Your people are fools to lose someone with your skills. The warmth in his voice made Nira's pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with the repair work. Their growing closeness was tested one night when the predators came. Nira woke to Marcus's urgent whisper, something's wrong. The normal chorus of night sounds had gone silent, replaced by an ominous stillness that raised every instinct she possessed. Vorthik, she breathed, recognizing the signs. Night hunters, very dangerous. They emerged from their shelter to find 3 pairs of glowing eyes surrounding their camp. The Vorthik were massive feline predators with crystalline claws that could slice through stone. Their sleek bodies seemed to absorb light, making them nearly invisible except for those piercing eyes. Marcus reached for his energy weapon, but Nira caught his arm. No, the light will anger them, make them attack. Then what do we do? Nira's mind raced. Vorthik were intelligent hunters, but they had one weakness. They were deeply territorial and would not tolerate rivals in their hunting ground. Follow my lead, she whispered, then began to make a low, rumbling sound deep in her throat. The territorial call of a Vorthik matriarch. Marcus stared at her in amazement as she continued the complex vocalizations, her voice taking on tones he hadn't known she could produce. The circling predators paused, confused by the challenge from what appeared to be small, harmless prey. Now, Nira whispered, we back away slowly. Stay behind me. For tense minutes, they retreated step by step, while Nira continued her deception. The Vorthik followed, but maintained their distance, uncertain whether to attack or withdraw. Finally, when they reached the stream that marked the boundary of another territory, the great cats melted back into the shadows. Marcus let out a shaky breath. How did you know to do that? My grandfather was a beast speaker before he became a healer, Nira explained, trembling now that the danger had passed. He taught me the voices of many creatures. Without thinking? Marcus pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "You saved our lives." Nira's breath caught as she felt the solid warmth of his body against hers, the rapid beat of his heart matching her own. When she looked up at him, something had changed in his expression. The careful friendship of the past weeks had transformed into something deeper, more intense. "Marcus," she whispered, and saw her own feelings reflected in his eyes. They stood there in the starlight, holding each other as the realization washed over them both. This was no longer just about survival or companionship. Somewhere in the shared dangers and quiet moments, something precious and fragile had grown between them, something that would soon be tested in ways neither of them could imagine. Cale Thorne's jaw clenched as he studied the tracks at the edge of the Whispering Grove. 3 weeks he had been hunting the exile. 3 weeks of following cold trails and false leads through terrain. It grew more treacherous with each passing day. His patience, never abundant, had worn thin as morning mist. "The trail splits here," reported Jorik, his most trusted tracker, a lean Zilani with ritual scars marking his cheeks. "One set of prints belongs to Nira Voss, but these others ... He frowned, kneeling beside the strange impressions in the soft earth. "I have never seen their like." Cale dismounted from his riding beast, examining the alien footprints himself. They were roughly the same size as Zilani's, but shaped differently, narrower, with a peculiar sole pattern that spoke of manufactured footwear rather than traditional leather boots. "She has found help," he concluded, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. The other 4 warriors in his hunting party exchanged glances. They all knew that tone, had seen what happened when Cale's pride was wounded. "Perhaps we should return to the elders," suggested Viren, the youngest of the group. "If there are outsiders on our world... Cale's violet eyes flashed with fury. "We return with the exile, or we do not return at all." He remounted his beast, a creature bred for endurance and speed. "Whatever manner of being has corrupted her will answer for this transgression." The truth was more complex than Cale would admit, even to himself. When Nira had refused their joining ceremony, she had done more than simply defy tradition. She had humiliated him before the entire tribe. Whispers followed him now, questions about his worthiness as a mate, his ability to lead. Every day she remained free was another day, his authority diminished. But beneath the wounded pride lay something darker, genuine confusion. Nira was beautiful, intelligent, from a respected family. By all rights, she should have been honored to join with the chief's son. Her rejection had shattered something fundamental in his understanding of the world, leaving him grasping for explanations that made sense. The alien tracks provided one. Clearly, she had been seduced or bewitched by some otherworldly influence. Once he eliminated this corruption, she would see reason and return willingly to fulfill her proper role. As they followed the trail deeper into the forbidden zones, Cale allowed himself to imagine their reunion. Nira would be grateful for her rescue, repentant for the trouble she had caused. Perhaps he would be magnanimous in victory, forgiving her transgression in exchange for absolute submission to his will. The fantasy sustained him through 2 more days of hard travel, until they crested a ridge overlooking a small valley and saw smoke rising from what appeared to be a makeshift camp. "There," Cale breathed, raising his far-seeing glass to study the scene below. What he saw through the lens made his blood boil. Nira sat by a fire, but she was not alone. Beside her was a creature that looked almost Zilani, but wrong and subtle. Ways, paler skin, coarser features, wearing strange garments of unfamiliar materials. As Cale watched, the alien said something that made Nira laugh, a sound of genuine joy he had never heard her make in his presence. Worse still, when the creature reached out to brush a strand of hair from her face, she did not flinch away. Instead, She leaned into the touch with an intimacy that made Kale's vision blur with rage. "Abomination," he snarled, lowering the glass. "She has been corrupted beyond redemption." His warriors gathered around him, awaiting orders. Kale studied the terrain, noting escape routes and defensive positions. The alien appeared to carry some form of weapon, though its design was unfamiliar. "We go in fast and hard," Kale decided. "Kill the outsider, capture the exile. Show no mercy." To the corruptor. They descended into the valley like avenging spirits, their war cries echoing off the canyon walls. Kale led the charge, his ceremonial spear gleaming in the afternoon sunlight, ready to cleanse this stain upon his honor. But the aliens were not caught unaware. The moment the war cries began, a pale creature was in motion, shouting warnings. To Nira, while reaching for its strange weapon, brilliant bolts of energy lanced out, forcing Kale's warriors to scatter and seek cover behind rocks and fallen logs. "Sorcery," gasped Viren, his eyes wide with fear. "Technology," Kale corrected. Grimly, he had heard tales from the Star Watchers, stories of beings who sailed between worlds using forces beyond Zelani understanding. But he bleeds like any creature. The battle was fierce, but brief. The alien's weapon was devastatingly effective, but his supply of energy bolts was limited. When the device finally ceased its deadly fire, Kale pressed the attack, but Nira and her companion had used the distraction well. By the time Kale's warriors overran their position, the pair had vanished into the dense foliage on the valleys. Far side, after them. Kale roared, but pursuit through the tangled undergrowth proved difficult. The alien moved through the forest with surprising skill for an outsider, while Nira's knowledge of hidden paths and secret ways allowed them to stay ahead of their pursuers. Night fell before. Kale was forced to call a halt. They had followed the fugitives to the very edge of the Shadowlands, a region his people avoided even in daylight. "We should not go further," Jorik warned, his scarred face troubled. "The Shadowlands are cursed. Evil spirits dwell there." Kale studied the dark forest ahead, weighing his options. Common wisdom said the Shadowlands were death to any who entered, but his prey had fled into those very depths. "Evil spirits," he mused, "or simply another test of our resolve?" As his warriors made camp, Kale stood watch at the forest's edge. Somewhere in those haunted depths, Nira was likely sharing warmth with her alien companion, probably believing herself safe from pursuit. She would learn otherwise. Far ahead, hidden in the embrace of a massive tree whose hollowed trunk provided shelter, Marcus held Nira close as she trembled from exhaustion and fear. "They won't give up," she whispered against his chest. "Kale's pride demands my capture." Marcus stroked her hair, marveling at how its blue-black strands seemed to shimmer even in the darkness. "Then we keep moving. There has to be somewhere on this planet where we can be safe." "The Temple of Echoing Lights," Nira said suddenly, lifting her head to meet his eyes. "It lies at the heart of the Shadowlands. None of my people would dare approach it. What's there? Ancient ruins. The stories say they hold great power, but also great danger." She hesitated. Many who have sought the temple have never returned. Marcus considered their options. Behind them lay certain capture and probable death. Ahead waited unknown dangers, and possibly their only hope of freedom. "Then we go forward," he decided. Nira nodded, then surprised him by reaching up to cup his face. In her hands. "Marcus, if we die in the Shadowlands, I want you to know ... She took a shaky breath. "I want you to know that these days with you have been the happiest of my life." Something inside Marcus's chest seemed to expand and contract at once. Without words, he lowered his head and kissed her, pouring all his feelings into that single moment of connection. When they parted, both were breathing hard. "We're not going to die," Marcus said firmly. We're going to find this temple, discover whatever secrets it holds, and figure out a way to be together. Promise me, Nira whispered. I promise. As they settled in to wait for dawn, neither saw the shadowy figure watching from the darkness, a figure that had been following them both, unseen and unsuspected, since their journey into the Shadowlands began.